Good afternoon and you're very welcome to Leaders' Questions. We'll be crossing over to the Dáil Chamber in just a few moments where the Taoiseach will be in the hot seat today taking questions from the opposition. Now joining us in studio today is our own Miall Lahan, TD Thomas Pringle. Thank you gentlemen for joining us. Before we cross over to the Dáil, this Commission of Inquiry, Miall, it's all about consensus, we're told. Yeah,
Michael Noonan will make it clear that they will go as far as possible. He says to include everything that has been put to them by the opposition. That should, you would say, for the most part, probably take the sting out of the debate that could follow later this evening. It's due to run from 5 until midnight tonight. I suppose the key areas that some people have already looked at is that relationship that existed between the Department of Finance and IBRC. How far can you go into looking at the personalities involved, the kind of conflicts that may have emerged there? Lucinda Creighton already having a statement out on that, saying that she doesn't believe that particular part of the investigation can go far enough. OK, so we're not looking at an entirely harmonious note on all of this. What are the central components as you see them, Thomas?
Well, I think one of the major issues certainly is that after the liquidation of IBRC as well needs to be included in the timeline that the inquiry looks at, because there is some significant events that took place after the liquidation as well, and I think the Commission has to be empowered to look at those and to follow all the leads basically and the transactions that have taken place. And
there appears to be some give on that, doesn't there, that transactions that occurred around that time, that they may well be investigated beyond that 2013 liquidation date.
Yeah, Michael Noonan seemed to be given some indications of that yesterday evening, but we'll have to wait and see the terms of reference to see actually have the concerns of Catherine Murphy and the other opposition leaders been actually identified and addressed in the terms of reference. So we won't really know until we actually see them, how far he has gone.
The other priorities, I know Miall Martin of Fianna Fáil, Miall was talking about this IBRC Wealth Management Unit being included. Now, that's why that's significant.
He was saying that is probably an area that should have been disposed of, but it couldn't for some reason. That's kind of one of the key areas that Fianna Fáil are looking to. But I think for the most part, the government definitely were under severe pressure about this for several months, and this is the third attempt to try and take the heat out of it. You would think that they will be able to do that, at least in the short term, until this investigation is completed.
What about the department itself, Deputy Pringle? They too will come under the spotlight. Is that your understanding?
Well, again, we're still not fully clear on that either, and I think it's something that does have to be part of the Commission's terms of references, because it's very clear that relationships between the department and IBRC had broken down, and the reasons why that has happened as well, I think, need to be looked at.
All right, Thomas, we're going to cross over now to the Chamber. Thank you.
Last Thursday week, Deputy Catherine Murphy gave the background to reasons why she believes an independent Commission of Inquiry should be established and set up in relation to transactions in IBRC since 2009. And Deputy Murphy had sources who she believed were reliable and robust, and who said that gave very low interest rates to Mr O'Brien. Within minutes of this being reported, Taoiseach, the shutters came down on almost all media outlets from reporting what Deputy Murphy said, something which was in the public interest and something which also was covered by absolute privilege under Article 15 of the Constitution. The national broadcaster was silenced, TV3, radio stations, most of the newsprint outlets, not all, broadsheet.ie and Sunday Times and others printed the material, but all others were effectively silenced by threats and intimidatory action to the effect that this was contrary to a court injunction. Taoiseach, you were also silent. For over that entire period, for the 5 days that the media were silent, you were silent. You didn't criticise the media blackout. You didn't defend the right of a member of this House to raise issues of public interest. She was actually called a liar and a thief during the public debate that ensued. You went into hiding, Taoiseach. And many people across the country could not understand why the Taoiseach of the country would not come forward and support unequivocally and in public Dáil privilege. Is it because Mr Denis O'Brien was leading the legal challenge that you remain silent? Do you think he was right to do what he did, which is effectively to threaten legal action to media outlets to prevent them from reporting what is said in this House.
Question, please. Thank you.
Are you scared of this individual, Taoiseach? Were you afraid to confront the issue and the person? And why were you willing to remain silent, Taoiseach, and indifferent at attempts to stifle legitimate debate, to limit reporting of Dáil proceedings, and not to respond to personalised attacks against Dáil deputies?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy Martin. I had 5 engagements, public engagements on the Friday, and the same on the Saturday and Sunday in other locations. The request made to me was to recall the Dáil. There was an injunction granted by the High Court. There was a case before the High Court. This House could have met on the Sunday, the Monday and the Tuesday and talked itself round in circles. It had no authority and no function in interfering with a court case. And had I made any comment, either side could have used those comments in the intervening period until the judge clarified the intent of the injunction that he gave. And I was very happy to see the Justice clarify exactly that the rights and the privileges of elected members of this House were absolutely vindicated as protected under the Constitution. So for that reason, Deputy Martin, it wasn't appropriate to have the House recalled here. In fact, if anything were to be recalled, it would be the Committee of Procedure and Privileges, because it's internally in the House here that members apply sanctions if they so wish to members of the House. So while the privilege is constitutional, it's not unlimited, and people who do make statements in the House have a responsibility to exercise that privilege in a proper and appropriate fashion. So for that reason, as this House had no function in either attempting to direct or influence in any way a Justice of the High Court who cleared beyond yea or nay the fact that the members of this House have constitutional protection for what they say here, and there's a responsibility on them to use that privilege with responsibility.
I believe Deputy Murphy used that privilege with responsibility. Judging from your remarks, you clearly don't, and you seem to be siding with Mr O'Brien in that argument. But I would put it to you, Taoiseach, that I didn't ask you about the recalling of the Dáil now. I asked you why you remain silent on fundamental principles that go to the heart of a functioning parliamentary democracy. The right of media to report on utterances articulated in this House. The right of Dáil deputies to raise issues of legitimate public interest without being pilloried and called a liar and a thief. It is extremely sad, Taoiseach, that you could not, at that time, as the leader of the country, come out publicly and say what was fundamentally correct and proper. For example, in the last number of days, we've been treated to your views on subjects as diverse as Sepp Blatter and bottle banks, Taoiseach. And with the greatest of respect, Taoiseach, people are getting very fed up of this shallow, superficial politics, Taoiseach.
Sorry, hold on.
Because I would put it to you, Taoiseach.
Question.
Well, OK, Deputy Keogh. I mean, I can remember 4 years ago when the Moriarty
Sorry, through the chair, please. Thank you.
The Taoiseach ducked and dived on that occasion before he had to come in here and belatedly accept its findings. Now, I don't know what it is. The silence over the last week was unacceptable, unedifying. And what the Taoiseach's response to today to my question, I think, was an extraordinary response.
Thank you.
We didn't need the judge to tell us that we had absolute privilege under Article 15. We didn't need the judge to tell us that. And it's absolutely extraordinary you would come in and say that. And that both sides would use your arguments somehow in the court case that would follow. That's a bogus position you're putting forward, Taoiseach. You were opening hotels and pubs and whatever you were doing on that Friday.
Thank you, Deputy.
And the rest of the country were debating this issue. And you were deliberately absent, because when you want to speak about something, whether it's a bottle bank, the launch of a football match, or whatever, you're there to do it. It was unacceptable, Taoiseach, that you remained so silent on an issue so fundamental to our parliamentary democracy. It was an absence of leadership on your part.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy Martin. As I said, it's not for you to put words in my mouth. you lead a party that was described in the past as being slightly constitutional. I'd make this point to you. Besides opening the facility for hygiene and all the rest of it, you forgot to mention that I actually launched the National Carers Strategy Week and the absorption into Irish Rural Link of the structure for Meals on Wheels around the country. These are matters that I'm sure are relevant to you as to anybody else. And if you think it's appropriate that these things should not be commented upon, well then, fair enough. It ill behoves you, Deputy Martin, to come in here speaking about leadership, because you did not do anything to further the cause of those who sought equality in marriage over the last month. In fact, the Yes for Equality people had to put up the football posters down the west. While your party sneered and jeered at a senator who was explaining the importance and the value of that vote.
Thank you.
Now, as I said to you,
Sorry, would you please?
As I said to you, Deputy Martin,
you stay quiet, please.
As I said to you, Deputy Martin, the Constitution is very clear about the privilege of elected members of this House. It's unequivocal in its statement that cannot be changed except by referendum of the people. It was not for me to comment on the outcome of a court case in which a Justice of the High Court was about to issue his clarification, which he did. And in keeping with my own views on this for very many years, the judge clearly vindicated the rights of public representatives in this House, that what they say is under privilege, that privilege should be used with responsibility.
Thank you.
So your comments are not relevant. The situation was that anybody could have taken comments from the Taoiseach about a court case pending either way. It was very clear the Constitution was not changed, cannot be changed except by will of the people and by vote of the people. And the right of every member in this House, irrespective of who they represent, is clear in that Constitution, and it ill behoves you to come in with that kind of comment here.
Deputy Adams, thank you.
Margaret.
Deputy Adams, thank you very much. Silence, please. Silence. Deputy Adams, thank you very much. Sorry, would you please, Deputy Durkan, would you please? The Deputy is on his feet. Would you show some respect to him? Thank you. Deputy Adams, thank you.
Taoiseach, it would not have been necessary to establish a commission of investigation into certain matters pertaining to transactions entered into by IBRC if the government had properly answered questions here in the Dáil. And I've been asking these questions for over 3 years now. I'm going to repeat some of them again today. In 2012, Chocta Pierce Doherty and I submitted a range of parliamentary questions about IBRC. The responses were deliberately vague and obstructive, opaque. Some of these questions related to IBRC hiring Blackstone to advise them on the sale of assets. Now, as you well know, Blackstone is an American vulture capital group which was seeking to buy IBRC's loan book. So anybody could see the obvious conflict of interest at the heart of this arrangement. But the Minister, and indeed yourself, indicated in your responses that you had no difficulties with any of this. You also refused to answer questions about the fees which were being paid to these advisers, as did the Minister. And then in November 2011, you met the head of Blackstone, Stephen Schwarzman, and his associate, Jerry Murphy. And during this period, the government-appointed chair of NAMA's advisory board actually sought to appoint Jerry Murphy to this board. And again, the conflicts of interest are startling. And this appointment was abandoned after Sinn Féin parliamentary questions drew attention to the matter. But we still didn't get answers to the questions that we raised. So, Taoiseach, will you tell the Dáil what you discussed with the head of Blackstone, Mr. Schwarzman, or with Mr. Murphy? Did you raise concerns about the very obvious conflicts of interest and Blackstone taking on an advisory role with IBRC when it was already bidding for IBRC loans? And in your response to me, Tommy Cricknahan, to a leader's question in 2012 about the relationship between the Department of Finance and IBRC, you refused to answer my questions. But you did say the highest ethical standards were being employed. Do you still stand over this assertion?
Thank you.
Taoiseach.
Well, I think I met the person you mentioned on 2 occasions. We discussed the general state of the Irish economy and how things were moving in the right direction. It wasn't for me to discuss any individual company's business. In regard to the standards that you mentioned in respect of the Department of Finance, you're aware that the Minister for Finance met with your own Deputy Leader and the other either spokespersons or leaders of the parties yesterday to hear their proposals insofar as the Commission of Investigation is concerned. The issue here, Deputy Adams, was that Government were very anxious to get all of the information out to the public domain and into the House here as quickly as possible. And thank you. And the structure to do that was to ask the Special Liquidator to collate all of the files and present them to the Minister for Finance by the end of August, to be sent to the Public Accounts Committee, and that on their examination, if they requested a further independent investigation, that the law would be changed to allow the CNAG's office to do that. That strategy was overtaken by the events of the last fortnight, in particular in respect of the case in the court, and also because of the range of allegations and assertions that are made. I stress that nothing has been proven against anybody as being wrong in wrongdoing here. So that's why we're having a 2-day debate now on the terms of reference, which were approved by the Cabinet this morning and which were contributed to both by your own party and the other parties opposite, so that this matter can be dealt with authoritatively and independently by a judge to be nominated as a sole member in charge of this Commission of Investigation. So the Minister has been very flexible, actually, in the terms of reference, as you'll be aware. He's even gone so far as to say that if issues were being dealt with or contracted by IBRC before the Special Liquidator was appointed, that the flexibility is there to follow those particular transactions through. And also that if there are other particular issues arise, that consideration would be given to those. So I think while the members here will have the opportunity now over the next 2 days to contribute to the debate, the intention here, Deputy Adams, is that the Commission of Investigation would be properly resourced, would deal with all of the issues that are set out between 21st of January 2009 and the 7th of February 2013, the date that the IBRC was liquidated. Obviously, the government look forward to hearing the propositions from the various deputies here over the next period, and let the Commission get underway and do its work. That is in the public interest, and that's something that the government supports very strongly.
Thank you, Deputy Adams.
This is the question I asked you, Taoiseach, in February 2012. The Irish Bank Resolution Corporation, the bank formerly known as Anglo, has retained the services of the Blackstone Group to advise it on the sale of 30 billion of loans it has across Ireland and Britain. How come these vulture capitalists are advising on this loan and are not precluded for bidding for the debts? They are advising on the sale but are bidding at the same time. Surely this is a conflict of interest which runs totally contrary to the Taoiseach's election promises to straighten out these issues and make them transparent. You then, in response, went on your rambles around Erin, never get any response at all to these issues, and then you come in here and you say that your intention all the time was to get all the information out into the public. The Dáil record with Chocta Murphy and with Chocta Pierce Doherty and with myself shows the exact opposite to be the case.
Please. Thank you.
When I put it to you, what you raised with Mr. Schwartzman and Mr. Murphy, you said it wasn't for you to raise any company's business. You are supposed to protect the taxpayers' interest. You're the Taoiseach. This is public money. The billions and millions that we're talking about belongs to the people. So I want to ask you again, Taoiseach, to give some clarity. And we don't need a commission of investigation. You met them. You've said now you met them on 2 occasions. What did you discuss with them?
Thank you.
The state of the Irish economy and the improvements in the Irish economy. The review, as you know full well, will consist of dealing. Well, I'm telling you, with all transactions, activities and management decisions which occurred between the 21st of January 2009, which is the date of the nationalisation of IBRC, and the 7th of February 2013, the date of the appointment of the special liquidators to IBRC. Now,
sorry, you can't have a point of order in reply to a question.
Deputy Murphy.
Please, Deputy. Well, please, Deputy.
Deputy Murphy.
I can't intervene in relation to answers to questions.
Deputy Murphy raised. Deputy Murphy raised a number of issues here in the Dáil and followed them through very consistently. And the response of government was to collate all of those files to the special liquidator and present them to the House and to the Public Accounts Committee. Deputy Murphy made a very cogent argument in respect of a number of issues. The events have now transpired that we're having the Commission of Investigation, where all of these matters can be discussed and can be dealt with. Which meeting are you talking about?
Sorry, please. Through
Which
the
meeting
chair.
are you talking about?
Deputy Fleming is next, please. Thank you.
As I said to you, discussed the question of the improvement in the Irish in the Irish economy and the actions the government were taking to drive that in the right direction. I would say that Deputy Murphy was very clear in her contribution here that she had checked her sources on more than one occasion and stood by them. And on that basis, and on account of the issues that have transpired here, we now have a Commission of Investigation with a broad and flexible set of terms of reference which have been contributed to by all members of the House and which will be debated over the next 2 days. And it's in the interests of the public and therefore the government to have this Commission of Investigation, give the sole member proper resources to do his or her job and get on with that. And the Minister for Finance will make the opening statement, I think, at 5:30.
Deputy Fleming.
Margaret, Count Caller. Taoiseach, the legitimacy of the body politics has been undermined once more in this most recent sordid debacle in this country. The diligence and persistence with relevant questions by Deputy Catherine Murphy and in the interest of democracy and the Irish people has unearthed and exposed another web of the same old suspects, which is really the banks and the big businesses intertwined with the political system. It again begs the question, have we learned anything from the previous major banking scandals and the subsequent collapse of the economy? There are serious concerns and alarm by the general public regarding the huge scale of write-down sanctioned by IBRC with a select group of 40 big businesses and a select group of individuals receiving a combined write-off of their debts of thousands of millions of euro, which could amount to anything up to 1.2 billion, it seems. Yet again, the taxpayer is shouldering this back-breaking burden. And this is in contrast to what is happening at the other end of the scale. There's ordinary householders where there is tens of thousands of mortgages that have been sold off to the vulture capitalists. And these particular funds, and they're being sold off by the IBRC. These unfortunate householders have absolutely no mortgage protection as they're outside the control of the central bank. There is rough justice for some who are trying to keep a roof over their heads, and in contrast to another soft landing for the elite and preferential treatment for these people. Taoiseach, how will you ensure that this Commission of Investigation does not become another multi-millionaire euro burden to the taxpayer with no definitive end to the investigation, and will you impose a timely deadline by which time this work will be completed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy. Well, you're aware that obviously the fact that Anglo-Irish Bank and Irish Nationwide cost the taxpayer $34 billion, which was the real burden imposed on hundreds of thousands of people over that period throughout the country, where 300,000 jobs were lost and immigration became a factor in everyday life again. Obviously, with the decisions and the challenges faced up to by the people, we're now in a very different position economically. We hope that by creating another 40,000 jobs this year and the same next year and in 2017, that we will have all of the jobs that were lost recovered and be in a state approaching full employment. Clearly, the government have restructured the banking system, got rid of some banks, restructured others. The Minister met recently with the main banks in respect of the question of reduction in variable interest rates, which is of interest to hundreds of thousands of people. Clearly, the question that you raised about the Commission of Investigation, well, as I said earlier on, Deputy, when the House and the Oireachtas signs off on the terms of reference for a Commission of Investigation, that Commission of Investigation then becomes the sole responsibility of the member who is conducting its business. And that member will conduct their business in the way that they see fit within the context of the general terms of reference. But let me repeat again that no justice in this country is a pawn of any minister, and no justice is a pawn of any government. So it's not possible to politicise it, otherwise it doesn't work. You can't give directions or diktats to a sole member who is handed responsibility to run a Commission of Investigation in an authoritative, independent and objective way, where the questions can be answered and the truth be known. And that's what government wish in this case. So I can't answer the question, Deputy, as to person or persons or entities that may well take court cases during the course of the Commission of Investigation. But there is a period of 6 months to bring in a final report, and that for whatever reason that doesn't happen, that a report of the work to that point be brought forward. So when we sign off here on the terms of reference, it then becomes a matter of responsibility for the member involved. And I'm quite sure that the person who takes up that responsibility will run the Commission of Investigation in a very effective and competent fashion. As you well know, Deputy, over the years when we had tribunals, they ran for 10 years, for 12 years and for 14 years. And this method of having commissions of investigation is far more effective, and I've no doubt about that. This one will meet those rigorous highest standards also. So it's not a case of setting up a commission of investigation and then telling it how to do its work, when to do its work, and what you want out of it. You cannot politicise this, and that's right, to keep that distance and that objectivity there. So I hope that the Commission, when the terms of reference are approved by the Dáil and the Seanad, will be allowed to do its work in the way that we all want to see happen.
Thank you. Deputy Fleming.
Taoiseach, we could have been spared this inquiry if Deputy Murphy's questions were answered at the very outset in a fair and comprehensive manner. Unfortunately, that did not occur. And I think this matter here is best reflected in by a statement by Justice Liam Hamilton regarding the Beef Tribunal, and which Justice Hamilton said, quote, "I think that questions that were asked in the Dáil were answered in the same way that they have been answered here at the tribunal. there would have been no necessity for this inquiry, and a lot of time and money could have been saved. And I think this is replicated in this particular instance, I'll be honest about it. A memo from a senior official in the Department of Finance states that, quote, events in the past few months have led me to question the effectiveness of the management team in IBRC. And he states that he was concerned that the reputation of IBRC and by extension the state has been damaged as a result of these events. Interestingly enough, in a European study, OECD report back in 2012, Ireland has one of the lowest percentages of public trust by the perception of trust in the governance of state institutions.
Question, please.
And the statistics is that only 26% of Irish people have trust in the government. And this is a very revealing figure with our most recent, very, I would say, undistinguished history. That is why there is a need for a robust forensic inquiry question coming up. And we will have to get a forensic inquiry and to drill down to reveal the true facts. There is an urgent need to redeem public trust in the reform of post-Crest Ireland, but in addition to that, to restore our reputation as being internationally, for instance, being very trustworthy and transparent and a fair location to set up business. Taoiseach, will you ensure that the investigation will give a breakdown of each individual transaction and also exposure and what type of write-down happened and that the full transparency is revealed in each of those transactions?
Taoiseach. Thanks, Deputy. Well, first of all, I've been a supporter for a very long time that all questions being answered should be answered as fully and as completely as possible. Thank you.
Sorry, please. Sorry.
I tried to do that. I tried to do that.
Sorry.
I tried to do that.
Would you please?
I tried to do that from the questions that come into my own department, insofar as that's possible. I'd remind you that this government restructured and reformed the Freedom of Information system, which allows for deputies to put in questions in respect of information that they look for. That is not handled by ministers. That there are particular personnel in every department dealing with that, and I know that from many deputies' point of view, they've been able to get possibly more information, or certainly an extensive volume of information, out of which may come the particular or specific answer that they wish to get. It might be, I suppose, might be sometimes more appropriate if you were to work backwards, if you sort of were to be able to focus the question very precisely with the volume of material that comes into some departments. Not as easy maybe as might seem.
Thank you.
Public figures and politicians the world over have never been, in the higher echelons of public trust. I think the bankers were beneath the politicians there for some time. I'm not sure where it is now. Can I guarantee you that you're going to get answers to all the questions here? What I want to say to you is that the terms of reference to be debated and approved by the House, Deputy, will cover all transactions, activities and management decisions which occurred between the 21st of January 2009, which was the date of nationalisation of IBRC, and the 7th of February 2013, the date of the appointment of the special liquidators to IBRC, and which dealt with particular matters there. So that will become a matter for the judge in question, Deputy. It is not for anybody in this House to attempt to interfere in the work of the sole member once the terms of reference have been signed off and approved.
Thank you.
That person will run the business in the way that they see fit to do a proper, competent, professional, independent job. And that Deputy, I hope, will deal with all of the issues that arise about assertions, allegations, this person, this entity, that entity, so that clarity can be brought, which is in the public interest and which the government want to see arising from this Commission of Investigation.
Thank you.
And that concludes Leaders' Questions for this afternoon. We heard Fianna Fáil's Micheál Martin there raising the silencing of media outlets, as he put it, following Deputy Catherine Murphy's contribution in the House, in which details of Denis O'Brien's banking affairs were revealed, and the absence, as he called it, of our Taoiseach on this most significant matter of concern. Gerry Adams of Sinn Féin questioning this government and the Finance Minister in particular, their approach to questions put to them on IBRC, and he raised conflicts of interest as they existed between private equity groups, specifically Blackstone and IBRC. Tom Fleming there, lastly, of the technical group, focusing today on alleged write-downs on loans for wealthy IBRC customers. This in stark contrast with the lot of mortgage holders whose IBRC mortgages were sold off to vulture funds without any consumer protections afforded to them. Let's take those in sequence. Micheál, a hand to you first. The silencing of media outlets and the silencing of our Taoiseach to boot.
Yeah, this was a question. I don't think Micheál Martin could have really anticipated the unease that this seemed to cause the Taoiseach when asked why didn't he comment about what was happening the week before last, when the media outlets weren't able to report on what Catherine Murphy had said. Yet he did comment on things like the FAI, FIFA, and refer to bottle banks as well. The Taoiseach saying that his reason was clear. He couldn't say anything because whatever he might say as Taoiseach may be used in the courts the following week by either side, which that was the answer given. But he also said if the Dáil were to be recalled, he seemed to say that it would take the Committee on Procedures and Privileges, because it is their role to oversee if someone has abused privilege, which seemed to really be hinting at Catherine Murphy. And rather than Micheál Martin saying, I believe her, and what was said about her subsequently to that statement in the Dáil he disagreed with, Taoiseach not going that route, actually pointing out the consequences of an abuse of privilege, which isn't what you would have expected on a day when an entire commission of investigation, he would later say, is because of what Catherine Murphy has said. So
less than supportive then, is that fair to say? Because Minister Michael Noonan has come out and been quite lauding of Catherine Murphy and her behaviour and her approach to all of this.
Yeah, it has, and I think the Taoiseach's remarks today were really quite outrageous. It seemed clear from what he had said, and Micheál Martin pointed it out in his reply, is that he believed that Catherine Murphy had abused her privilege by raising these issues. And, you know, it is only the use of this privilege that has got us to a situation where these matters have to be investigated, which are of extreme and public importance. And
so is it your position then that Taoiseach should have been more forthcoming on the matter last Friday week instead of around the country?
I think so. As a Taoiseach and as leader of the Dáil and leader of the country, he should have been to the fore and protecting the right of privilege and the absolute privilege that is afforded to Dáil members. And at the very least, he could have come out and said, well, you know, I don't want to comment on because there's a court case that's going to get clarity in relation to this. But he didn't even say that. He went to ground and he disappeared. Yeah. And it shows maybe that the real government attitude towards these matters that are being raised by opposition deputies.
Right. That, of course, is a very significant criticism to level towards the Taoiseach, that absence of leadership on a matter of parliamentary democracy.
Yeah, he did say later on, though, that the reason the investigation is being extended is because Catherine Murphy said she has checked her sources a number of times, but essentially, you know, saying that is why they are going this step further. So I suppose, in fairness to them, you'd have to say that. But you would have expected, given that the Cabinet had just approved the terms of reference, probably a stronger first response from the Taoiseach.
Right, and that's something that Tom Fleming referred to later on during Leaders' Questions. Let's move on to Blackstone and the IBRC. We heard today of potential conflicts of interest, this matter raised by Sinn Féin's Gerry Adams. Tom Springle.
Yeah, it seems that Blackstone were advising IBRC on the sale of assets, and at the same time appear to be tendering for the purchase of those assets as well. We've heard a lot about Chinese walls over the last couple of weeks within organisations. I would imagine there would have to have been some fairly massive Chinese walls there to protect.
And do we know, was their bid to buy over certain assets, was that successful or not?
I actually don't know at this stage, but it would be very interesting to see, just in terms of the Commission, whether the judge looks into this as well, because it seems to me a potential for very huge conflict of interest, and it's something that should be examined in the terms of the Commission as well.
And these so-called conflicts of interest, it's not just in relation to Blackstone. We've heard of them in the past, potentially in relation to SiteServe with various solicitors, with Davy and their clients, with KPMG again very recently. It seemed to be happening at a widespread level.
There's a huge problem, I think, in this country with a very limited number of big organisations that advise and provide legal services and provide other accountancy services and audit services, and they all seem to be working for the same organisations on different, what should be services that are kept separate, and that they should be providing oversight for the organisation. And if nothing else, it's not ethical, I believe, that the same company should be providing a whole range of services in this way.
And it leads to... I suppose it should be said that there is no evidence that anything untoward did happen, but certainly it has been established that the same party was acting.
And it does cloud the issue as well in terms of the public mind, and I think we have to have clarity at all times in relation to that.
And that, Micheál Lehane, is something also that Tom Fleming brought up, the international reputation damaged by these perceived conflicts of interest and various goings-on within IBRC.
Yeah, and Tom Fleming also raising the fact that trust in public officials here, according to an OECD report that he quoted from, not as high as you might expect. The Taoiseach going some way to say that questions were answered and the best attempt was made at answering them in the Dáil. But
it's got quite a comical
reception. Big laugh from some of the opposition. The relevant quote there from Tom Fleming, interesting though, going all the way back to the Beef Tribunal and the late Mr Justice Hamilton saying if questions had been answered properly there wouldn't be any need for a tribunal. The Taoiseach saying...
Taoiseach said that this government took it upon themselves to strengthen FOI, but of course that was only resorted to after Catherine Murphy didn't get the answers.
This is something that government is saying now. If you want background information on something, which of course you need when it comes to asking questions about IBRC, that TDs even have to go the FOI route, which seems curious. The quote from the Taoiseach there saying sometimes it's more appropriate to work backways.
What did you make of that, Thomas Pringle? Have you ever availed of FOI in order to gain information in order to put a PQ?
Yeah, well, I've had to avail of FOI to gain information in relation to different aspects, and it is very frustrating, you know, and the Taoiseach was clearly saying there, obviously you're not asking the right questions, so we're not going to answer them, and that seems to be the attitude that they work with, and I think the big laugh there was in terms of the Taoiseach saying that he does his best to answer all questions fully. I've done leaders' questions as well, asking the Taoiseach questions, and the one thing you don't get is answers.
Finally, Micheál, and this was a serious issue raised by Tom Fleming, and that is the plight of those IBRC mortgage holders who have been left high and dry, essentially, by these venture capitalists.
Yeah, Tom Fleming contrasting write-downs, of course, when they have to be looked at in detail now by the Commission of Investigation as to what happened or whether they happened. But nonetheless, we do know categorically that some people who had mortgages with all the conditions and supports that the Irish Central Bank system would afford them have lost that as those loans were sold to other banks at a time when those banks were trying to recoup some money.
And Thomas Pringle, you were saying that you have constituents, is it, that are in that exact same boat?
Yeah, I'm dealing with a number of constituents who would have been in a position to actually buy their own mortgage back off the banks when they were being packaged and sold, and the department point blank refused to entertain that with them.
So essentially these people, they are at the mercy of these, in terms of interest rates, in terms of being able to avail of the mortgage arrears resolution process.
That's right. I mean, the bank sold off their loans without their consent, and they removed legal protections that are there for them under the old bank's rules and put them at the mercy of these vulture funds, and that is a disgraceful situation, and there's many people at risk of losing their homes because of that. We don't know that, but there was, I think there was something in the region of about 45,000 mortgages were actually sold, so there's a lot of people at the mercy of these funds now.
All right. Listen, thank you very much, Deputy Thomas Pringle. Thanks for joining us on Leaders' Questions this afternoon, and our own Micheál Lehane. Thank you, as always. Let's take a look at the day's